Corporate culture is white supremacy culture, and as miserable as a lot of people are at work, including white folks, are really resistant to hearing me saying that. So inhale, exhale, my fellow pales. We're going to talk about this. That was the second paper of my dissertation. The first one was on the unwritten rules of work, which I was talking about in this video. While I'm sure this commenter is already aware, since she already knows the constructs, I get a lot of people saying, well, if it's just toxic, why do we call it white supremacy culture? Especially since in this video, I was talking about how Eastern Europeans struggle with the toxic individualism that is prevalent in corporate America. That's one of the unwritten rules. White supremacy culture isn't about if every white person is thriving. It's about who made the cultural norms, why they were made that way, and who they still benefit the most. It's about which cultural norms were established as the way things are and enforced through systems of power that were made when what we consider normal was founded. And we've had a lot of changes over time, but we haven't really addressed the norms, the rules. We've done things like affirmative action and other things which just piss people off. We haven't gotten down to, is the way things are fucked up? White supremacy culture is these very subtle things that we just consider normal. Perfectionism, that is that there's no room for error, but there's no real clear criteria for what you're looking for. And so because there's no clear criteria, it can be weaponized against certain people, usually people who are marginalized or people who are not liked. We say, oh, that wasn't good enough, but enough was never defined. And then someone who is mediocre but well-liked and then the in-group gets away with it. There's a constant sense of urgency. Everything's a rush, everything's an emergency. There's no time for any thoughtful presence, any creativity. Because of that, there's also never any time to make things better, to make things more inclusive, to make a work environment that doesn't suck. It's also part of why you don't get paid time off guaranteed in America. There's the norms of objectivity, that taking out emotion is one possible and that it's rational and somehow superior. And this is why you have things like being assertive but not too aggressive. But there's different perceptions of who is perceived as aggressive and who's perceived as assertive. There's also total ignorance of reality when you take emotion out of everything. Of like, well, if people aren't allowed to be upset, I can't explain why I have such high turnover right now. And what I was talking about in the video that this commenter was commenting on, the toxic levels of individualism, of putting one person and yourself above everyone else, and how this can lead to a lot of sabotage on teams. These rules aren't random. They're rooted in white, Anglo-Saxon, waspy cultures they've established way back in the day, pre-even America's founding. They were used to justify enslaving African labor, indentured servitude of the poor European migrants, and the horrible mass unaliving of Native Americans. Of seeing one culture, your own cultures, as superior to other ones, and that, well, the ends justify the means because look at these savages. These systems were designed to keep money and power with wealthy white men, to keep power concentrated, to make it harder for people to speak up against them, to make it harder to have proof that you're being unfairly discriminated against, because it's just so normal to expect for perfection and pick and choose who gets held to perfection and who's allowed to be mediocre. And to enforce these systems, and I've written about this a lot and talked about this a lot, these wealthy white men have strategically given little sprinkles of a little more privilege to other people while maintaining the vast amount of wealth. And the irony is, it works really well. If you give only white dudes the ability to own property, which was the first step, but they still have to work for you to live, and they're not really doing well, and you convince them to blame the women in their lives, the people they're controlling, etc., and not the person who's keeping most of the property, then you can maintain your power. We see this in organizations. As much as a lot of people are throwing hissy fits over DEI, the vast majority of corporate wealth has maintained with the same group of people. And it's these little norms, these little unwritten things that allow that to happen. And yes, it builds on each other and escalates. And it escalates to the point of violence in the outside professional world. And within the professional world, it escalates to being fired and blacklisted and wanting to leave an entire industry because it's just so toxic. And because it's not written down anywhere, it's hard to accuse someone of anything. You may not even know it's happening in the first place. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, you want to learn more, join my school linked in my bio. It's where I do all of my courses and I have weekly group coaching. If you want to ask me about your situation one-on-one, you can book some time on my calendar. The first 20 minutes are free and one-on-one coaching is available for purchase. If you want to test the waters first, I recommend joining my Thursday call in my school community where you can learn from other people, network, and ask me questions live. Leave a comment if you'd like to see a video about a particular topic or a course in my school.